I saw a video created by a woman called Ginger and her brother. They were talking about the Satanic Panic from a Christian perspective and how they came to the conclusion that they think Christians shouldn't play certain role-playing games. The first thing that I want to address is a statement made by Ginger in this video. She believes that the Satanic Panic was a preemptive attack from Satan's side because it ruined people's discernment when it came to entertainment. Additionally, she points out that if you say that there are some evil things in entertainment, people may view you as having the Satanic Panic mindset. The first part is very interesting because rather than acknowledging that the Satanic Panic came from Christians' inability to make informed decisions based on evidence, the issue is projected outwards and attributed towards an external demonic force. With this perspective, there is no opportunity for real self-reflection or to learn from the mistakes that were made. The fundamental issue still remains that many people have trouble distinguishing what is true information versus what is false. This is a problem that is not specific to Christianity, but it is more likely to be exploited in the context of a religion because religions come with internal logic. When I talk about internal logic in this context, I mean the beliefs and reasoning that exist within Christianity and serve to support the premise that Christianity is correct. The greater the reliance on internal logic, the less capability you have to recognize when you are wrong, because the internal logic acts as a self-reinforcing loop, preventing you from seeing contradictions and shortcomings. This is the main reason that the Satanic Panic occurred in the first place. People failed to make proper judgments based on the information that was available to them, and then they jumped to conclusions because of the internal logic within Christianity. Additionally, there is clearly a desire among a certain kind of Christian like Ginger to control entertainment or media to some degree because they portray ideas and themes that she does not like. This directly reflects the same train of thought within the Satanic Panic era, where boycotts and censorship were enacted by Christians who found certain forms of entertainment to be objectionable. Ginger seems to have not learned important lessons from the Satanic Panic and is now trying to repeat history. For example, she should have learned that the decision to impose your worldview upon other people through censorship and irrational fear may work in the short term as long as the people in positions of power agree with you, but in the long term you will cause a backlash against your beliefs because people dislike those authoritarian tactics and the fact that your message is fundamentally irrational. Many of the children who were living in the Satanic Panic era saw how the adults around them were behaving irrationally towards things like rock and role-playing games, which were obviously harmless. They learned early on how religion can be used to manipulate and exploit people, and as a consequence, they became more skeptical of religion. Ginger also stated that there wasn't any Christian influence on the major game systems, referring to tabletop role-playing games. This statement says a lot because she clearly hasn't done enough research to come to a really useful conclusion in this area. Gary Gygax was a Christian and the creator of Dungeons & Dragons, the main tabletop role-playing game that defined the genre. This fact undermines the main conclusion of her video, which is that Christians should make role-playing games because there aren't any Christian-influenced role-playing games available. Additionally, the role-playing game Exalted, 2nd edition, lists the Bible under suggested resources. This information will be relevant later. The book Exalted talks about the Bible as being a story of epic heroes that are given a mandate by God to go out and right their wrongs in the world. The point of role-playing games, generally speaking, is for the players to embody the hero archetype and to go on fun adventures to fight the forces of evil and chaos. When people focus on the part about how the forces of evil and chaos within the game look really bad, and then jump to the conclusion that the game itself is consequently really bad, they clearly haven't taken the time to understand that the forces of evil and chaos primarily exist within the game for the players to triumphantly defeat them. Ginger continues and makes the claim that by engaging in fantasy in which you summon demons and make pacts with them, you are giving the demonic legal access to you. She then acknowledges that this statement sounds extreme and that she will probably lose followers for saying it. Why this perspective seems extreme is because, first of all, it's a position that has an inappropriate amount of certainty considering the fact that it can't logically be supported by the evidence available. It also destroys the distinction between fantasy and the real world. Again, this is a core problem of the Satanic Panic mentality, the inability to use reason and evidence to distinguish what is real and what is fantasy. This is why fantasy seems so dangerous to certain Christians, because they have trouble intellectually accepting that there is no mechanism that would allow fantasy to harm them. This reminds me of the various stages of children's mental development. As children go through these stages, they first must recognize that there is a distinction between imagination and what is real. This distinction becomes more reliable and defined as time progresses. Children that are 7 or 8 years old can consistently understand that imagination or fantasy is fundamentally safe because it can't directly influence the real world. Both Ginger and her brother have Christian beliefs that prevent them from being able to reliably identify the boundaries between fantasy and reality because they are relying on the internal logic of Christianity to make that distinction rather than thinking critically. The thing about critical thinking is that you need to have some sort of reason to use it. There are people who don't particularly care about investigating whether an idea, story, or image is fact or fiction. This kind of person would first judge the idea in question as being valuable instead of judging whether it is true and accurate first. When the idea is later demonstrated to be wrong, they may feel like this is a personal attack on them because this is also evidence that their judgment is flawed. Ginger's brother talks about a game that is called Exalted, which was a wake-up call for him because it supposedly gave you an option to make a contract with a demon known as Bara. He also states that this is the name of a very real demon in Indian mythology. First of all, he's not using the term mythology correctly. Mythology refers to stories that are not literally true, yet he is acting as if a demon from Indian mythology is something that is not mythological, but literally a real spiritual being. There is a demon in this game called Mara, not Bara, but it has nothing in common with the Mara of Hindu and Buddhist mythology. They are different sexes and have completely different characteristics. Again, there is little distinction between reality and fantasy in his mind. Mara in the game does share similarities with what Ginger's brother is describing, but it's very clear that he is misremembering many details. Let's ask what exactly would be the problem if a game system drew inspiration from real-life religions in regards to demons or devils and their specific names. D&D does this, as an example, and it works quite well from a gameplay and lore perspective, because D&D is significantly influenced by the Christian Dante-esque view of the regions of hell. In D&D, the 9 hells are inhabited by devils. Dante described the 9 circles of hell in his book, The Divine Comedy. The criticism here seems to be that if things are viewed negatively by Christianity like tarot or demons, and these things are included in a game, that this is somehow spiritually dangerous. Yet we are not metaphysically interacting with demons or tarot, we are only dealing with them in terms of thought. A Christian book that warns against the dangers of demons or tarot will also choose to deal with the subject in terms of thought. So it's obvious that if we desire consistency, the Christian book and D&D would hold the same level of danger. If we are entertaining the belief that demons are actual beings that are very likely to influence you when you say their name, then we would expect that Christianity would enforce a very strict and very consistent taboo in this area in the same way that Native American belief systems hold that you should never say the word Wendigo. This is not the case, though. Ginger and other Christians have no issue saying the word Satan. Therefore, since Ginger and her brother's logic is being selectively applied rather than consistently, then this points to the conclusion that it's not really a coherent position, but rather a rhetorical move to portray certain things as dangerous only when it's convenient to her argument. They may genuinely believe the argument is valid, but it's still intellectually dishonest. Even though their arguments are flawed and intellectually dishonest, it could theoretically still be the case that saying demon names is dangerous. The issue is that we don't have compelling evidence that would bring us to this conclusion, though. If Ginger and her brother wanted to make a compelling argument, they could have at least tried to provide evidence, because the burden of proof falls upon the person making the claim. I've talked in other videos about so-called demonic possession cases and showed the various evidence which points to the conclusion that what is happening is almost certainly not an external influence originating from a fallen angel, but rather a manifestation of human psychic forces which are shaped by strong religious belief. In other words, Christian ideas can hijack the body and soul or psyche of the person in question to create the appearance of a demonic possession. Pseudo-demonic activity is a far more appropriate term. People don't really stop to think about the fact that if demons were real beings with their own agendas for inflicting suffering and chaos, they could easily possess animals as well as people. However, it is very rare that someone will even try to make the claim that an animal is possessed, let alone try to provide evidence for their questionable conclusion. So-called possession cases affect humans because human psychic forces are at work, not because there is an actual fallen angel that wants to torment you. Animals don't hold the religious beliefs that lead to so-called possession, so they can't manifest this sort of thing. Naturally, this explanation completely destroys the necessity for theodicies that can only offer superficial, unproven theories for why an all-loving God may allow demons to torment people in the first place. This kind of critical investigation of cause and effect based on evidence can only be accepted as valid if individuals allow evidence to change their perspective. This is not always the case, obviously, because they will insist that some things must be believed as a matter of faith. This is also seriously false. You are under no obligation to believe something as a matter of faith simply because someone portrays it that way. The premise that certain things should be believed as a matter of faith is simply a method of preventing those ideas from being critically examined. Since no valid criticism has been made on their end, I will make one. Christianity must maintain its narrative control. If entertainment involves fantasy worlds and stories that portray Christian concepts in a way that differs or inverts standard Christian belief, this allows the audience to consider new perspectives and question those Christian beliefs. Portrayal of Christian beliefs in this context is not in any way evidence of satanic influence, but the inappropriate satanic panic response to this kind of portrayal is evidence that certain people can't comprehend the fact that Christian beliefs would be portrayed in this way to make a statement about their shortcomings. For example, it would be thematically very interesting to portray a Greek god like Pan as being negatively influenced or corrupted by Christians literally demonizing him. This would reflect the real-world demonization which led to Pan's goat-like attributes being associated with demons. This could be used to tell a broader story of how Christianity tends to corrupt and demonize the ideas that are in conflict with its core beliefs. Christianity serves as a corrupting influence in this matter because it couldn't compel people to worship Yahweh instead of Pan through logic, and resorted to rhetoric to solve the problem. Loss of narrative control, even in terms of pure fantasy, poses a danger to Christian belief because Christianity is fundamentally based on holding specific narratives as true through faith, not material evidence. Viewing demons in terms of irrational fear, as Ginger and her brother are doing, reinforces the Christian narrative in the short term, but actually undermines Christianity in the long term, as the Satanic Panic showed us. Ginger's brother continues and claims that the rules of Exalted show you how to maintain your magic power with a demon within the game. This includes seducing someone, being intimate with them, and then reaping their soul for your demonic patron in exchange for magical power. Ginger's brother is trying to remember gameplay mechanics that he read 2.5 years ago, and as I mentioned before, it's not completely accurate. Ginger responds to his comments by saying that such a dark and wicked act should just not be a thing, and the fact that it's built into the mechanics of the game is horrendous. It is clearly a recurring concern that dark and evil elements of role-playing games is a concern for some Christians, and they don't seem to be capable of giving a valid response why this would be a problem. It is hard to tell a compelling story that involves action in high stakes without involving elements of good and evil. There is a strange lack of intellectual complexity here, with the inability to understand that there is a difference between using evil as a narrative tool and outright endorsing evil. This reflects a very superficial level of thought, which would be similar to stating that an actor's choice to play a villainous role reflects a personal moral failing. It is rather bizarre that they would have this kind of negative reaction to a mechanic that lets players interact with demons, considering the fact that they could simply choose to not use the mechanic when they play the game. This reflects a strange sort of childish reaction in which the game itself must be completely rejected, not because it was actually lacking, but because their peculiar beliefs prevented them from enjoying it. Not only do they believe that they can't have fun with the game, but they also don't want other Christians to have fun with it either. They are thinking far too simplistically and frankly irrationally. A young child that watches a particularly frightening movie may become convinced that a demon or monster portrayed within the movie may actually hurt him. The same childish logic is applied in the belief that a literal demon will somehow influence you when you engage with a role-playing game that involves demons. I have no doubt that both Ginger and her brother are intelligent people that are capable of using logic and rational thought to solve problems, but the issue is that they are trapped within a religious paradigm that it makes it difficult to do this. They are victims of a broken system, struggling within its grasp. There is another important issue here, and it is morality. It is judged to be immoral for the creator of a game to make a gameplay mechanic which involves doing a particularly wicked act to get a deal with a demon. Ginger's stance on this is quite clear. Such a mechanic is morally intolerable. The problem here is that this gameplay mechanic directly reflects the Christian thought that it is possible to do wicked acts to enter agreements with actual demons. So it is the case that criticisms of role-playing games which are made along these lines are actually just unintentional criticisms derived from the problem of evil. For those of you who do not know, the problem of evil is the issue where it is illogical for an all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving God to not intervene and stop evil acts from taking place. The Christian God is said to allow humans to make deals with demons because we are free to sin, but also later judges us for those actions. Yet he also provided the conditions that allow this to occur. If it is intolerable for the creator of a game to make a game mechanic that allows for wicked actions and demonic deals in fantasy worlds, surely it would be much more morally reprehensible for a divine creator to allow such things to take place in the real world. The outrage is selective, and the principle is not consistently applied because it is not coherent. The lack of self-reflection on the part of the Satanic Panic type of Christians leads them to indirectly morally critique the actions of a God who allows demons to allegedly influence our world. When the post hoc rationalizations that are theodicies are not employed, Christians do actually comprehend why such acts are completely intolerable, and there can be no valid reason why it would be acceptable to allow demons or humans to engage in these actions. The inaction of an alleged God speaks volumes. Terrible, evil things continue to happen, and Christians make the assumption that this somehow must serve a greater good, simply because they believe God is good. This is circular, self-reinforcing logic, of course. If we were to approach this purely logically, it would be more appropriate to conclude that if there is a God, the lack of any perceivable action on his part in the area of absolute evil is either deliberate in the sense that he doesn't value stopping absolute evil, or he lacks awareness or power that is necessary to intervene in a perceivable way. The conclusion of Ginger's video is that Christians shouldn't give their money to people who are creating material that indulges in unbiblical mindsets and behavior. They also conclude that Christians should make role-playing games. I have no problem with Christians creating new games because that action would likely bring new and entertaining things into the world. However, this advice would change very little in terms of the existing role-playing games for two reasons. Role-playing games are, generally speaking, not at odds with Christianity, and there will be many non-Christians that choose to buy really good games that actually are at odds with Christianity. While they believe that you should act in accordance with your values, there still remains the issue that their values led them to indefensible and illogical conclusions. It would be better to conclude that acting in accordance with your values is not enough, since certain values and beliefs are fundamentally destructive and irrational, like the Satanic Panic demonstrated. Therefore, you should be critical of your values and beliefs because they are not necessarily derived from higher beneficial truths, and they could cause damage both at the individual level and at the societal level.